Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, an event that really passed under the radar took place a couple of weeks ago. Sergeant Scholz, better known as Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany, was in Prague at the end of August to deliver a major speech. And it was a major speech. I mean, he was talking about an expanded European Union, and he kind of envisaged, obviously, the Western Balkans, what is called the Western Balkans. In other words, pretty much everybody who's in the Balkans who's not in the EU. So they're going to be all bunged in. But he also envisaged Moldova and Georgia to be brought into the European Union, which again is very surprising because Georgia is nowhere near the European Union, and it's seemingly has little real connection to Europe. Nonetheless, Georgia, as somebody that Russia has difficult relations with, is naturally very useful to the European Union. So he envisaged this, and of course, why is he doing this? And he's made clear in that speech that it's all about Russia. We are going to be this realm of values and the freedom and democracy, as opposed to Russia. What was interesting about that is that how Europe is now increasing. One thing I should just say, that he also, of course, made clear that there will not be unanimity as a way European Union operates at the moment. So the big decisions, there has to be unanimity. No, it's going to be qualified majority voting. And if you're going to bring in more and more countries, you're going to make sure that there's going to be a clear, decisive majority.
It's like packing the court.
Huh? It's packing the court. You can't have, Orban in Hungary, continually vetoing EU decisions. So he envisaged that. But what is striking about this is the extent to which Europe defines itself as opposed to the other. I mean, what is this Europe? I mean, it's essentially, we are not like Russia. And of course, he presents Russia as somehow aggressive and expansionist, even though, isn't Scholz the one who's advocating expansion? You're getting bringing more and more. I mean, what's Russia? Where's Russia expanding to? But these Scholz and Stoltenberg type, they never see the incongruity. But what's really interesting about all of this is that is this a kind of a benign version of what a German empire might have been? In other words, that unfortunately the Germans got themselves some terrible leaders, like the Nazis, who kind of really made the German empire, a horrible concept. But is this way that Germany is going to redefine itself in the world? Well, there were good sides to German imperialism. Unfortunately, Hitler kind of went off in a terrible direction. All this Nazi stuff, all the swastikas, the Nuremberg rallies, the anti-Semitism. We'll skip all that. But ultimately, this united Europe under German auspices, maybe it's not such a bad thing. It's united against the barbarians. Maybe Hitler got that one right. The Russians were the barbarians, and Europe has to define itself against that. Anyway, what do you think, Peter?
Yeah, well, I mean, using Russia as the barbarian is not a particularly unique idea. With Napoleon, we basically wanted to say that too. Yeah. It was interesting, with Sergeant Scholz talking about expansion. I just wonder what the Elysee Palace is thinking. Like, okay, expanding to the east. Okay, we kind of seen this before. I mean, right. And how do we fit into this? Okay, right. No, but it's interesting. This is an important topic, not because you can make historical parallels to the 1930s and 40s. You can, but it doesn't go, it's much more than that. But in Scholz's speech, where was the Franco-German, reconciliation, which I think anyone that knows anything about post-war Europe is one of the great achievements of de Gaulle and Adenauer, these giants of on the political scene. That's very important. And it sounds like Scholz is kind of detaching himself from it, because in the speech, there's no reference to it whatsoever as the foundations of a Europe a European Union that wants to expand it. Because ground zero is the reconciliation of France and Germany. There's no mention of that.
Right.
Also, it's kind of uncomfortable. Germany wants to expand east where the countries are poorer, okay? Which means they have less to bring to the table. And, so they're not going to sit at the dining table as a partner. They're on the menu, okay? And so this is a form of nation building, and it's supra-nation building if you use it under the auspices of the EU. Also, the voting patterns. Well, if obviously within the European Union, each country has bilateral relations with the other. So it's a Moldova. Well, I mean, Germany's relationship with Moldova is going to be significantly more important than Slovenia's, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So
I think that's right. Yeah, go on.
No, but if we're changing the voting pattern, it's basically, you're going to create a caucus, and it's a caucus of the powerful. Okay, maybe the French can do that. Okay, maybe they can, but Germany will be much more positioned if it doesn't bankrupt itself and go back into the Stone Age because of energy politics. But it is much more poised. I mean, no one denies the fact that Germany, and up until 20 minutes ago, was the industrial powerhouse of Europe. You got a lot of assets.
There's a lot of assets, but what is striking though is the level of the rhetoric that's coming out of Germany. So remember, we had from 1945 onwards, the Germans sort of kept a low profile. There were sort of various right wingers in Germany who would bluster occasionally. We want to go back to the 1937 borders and whatever. But they were immediately, silenced. That's it. You're fired.
And they were fanatically anti-communist.
They were very anti-communist, but there were also there was a guy who was a minister in the Helmut Kohl government in the 1980s who said, well, it's not unreasonable for Germany to return to the 1937 borders. And the moment he said that, Kohl had to fire him. That Germany had to accept its eastern borders as sacrosanct. So that officially, yes, Germany very anti-communist, and very much an active member of NATO, and yet also pretended to be somehow pacifist. We Germans, we have a special relationship to history. We have a special responsibility to bring peace and reconciliation. So the question always raised itself, well, why don't you leave NATO then? I mean, if you want to be have a special responsibility and want to just bring peace and reconciliation, why are you in NATO? But nonetheless,
Why does Sergeant Scholz go to Washington, D.C. and stand next to a decrepit president and get insulted to his face? Okay.
Right. But now they don't even pretend. So you've got people like Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, who kind of blurts out that somehow her father, who had fought on the Eastern Front, okay, had no choice on the matter, was somehow bringing peace to Europe. I mean, it was a strange kind of a comment to make. Maybe she misspoke, but she does an awful lot of misspeaking.
War is peace, peace is war. Poverty is prosperity, prosperity. Come on, that's Orwellian. I'm sorry, everyone. The Wehrmacht was not bringing peace.
No, it was not bringing it. Exactly. And then, of course, you've got Ursula von der Leyen. Again, her grandfather fought in World War II. Again, no one's going to hold that against her. But when you start ranting and raving about Russia, in the way that Nazis used to rant and rave about Russia, and you've got this grandfather who fighting on the Eastern Front in World War II, then it kind of becomes problematic. And then people wonder, well, is this basically Germany re-emerging under a new guise, pretending to be very liberal values, we're for democracy, but it's still the same old, against the barbarians. We're the bearers of a higher civilization.
Well, I don't think I was going to say reading in between the lines. You don't even have to read in between the lines with Scholz's speech, but it begs the question is that So Sergeant Scholz, can you explain to me with your vision, what is the difference between Germany and the EU? Are they interchangeable?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And that says a lot, okay? So this is the German European Union? I mean, that's essentially what he's saying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, but in a way, one has always thought in those terms that Germany, which is obviously the dominant economic power in the EU, will gradually take the EU to be its bailiwick. And so even with de Gaulle, who obviously cultivated the whole reconciliation with West Germany, I mean, even he, towards the end of his life, because he had vetoed twice Britain's entry into the European Economic Community, as it was then called. Even he, towards the end of his life, was changing his mind. I mean, once he saw just what an economic powerhouse West Germany was becoming, he knew that France could not by itself restrain Germany, and so he felt, maybe I was wrong, to keep Britain out. I need a buffer. But that's always been the case, that you can keep Germany under control, wear sackcloth and ashes. Oh, no, we don't want to dominate anybody. We just want values. So,
yeah, but I mean, in the speech also, the stationing of German troops in the Baltic states.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm sorry, you don't have to have read a really thick history book of the 20th century to kind of say, yeah, you guys have done that before. Okay. I mean, and also there's a dynamic that Western audiences, those that are aware of the speech, how do you see in his speech, he doesn't even give a thought how this would be perceived outside, like, for example, by the Russians, okay? Right. Which, of course, I mean, everyone should obviously understand with the conflict in Ukraine, President Vladimir Putin, it's a tenet of faith. He said, we were caught flat-footed in June 1941. We will never let that happen again, okay? Yes. And so, again, expansion and prosperity, but for whom and against whom?
Yes, yes. But that's what's so striking is that with this newer generation, they don't feel the need for any kind of restraint. So they let fly with all kinds of abuse against Russia, which a previous generation, even though they didn't like the Soviet Union, they didn't like communism, would still have felt restrained by. Obviously Willy Brandt and Helmut Schmidt also, and Helmut Kohl also. You got to be very careful in the language that you use. But now you have a new generation that feels no compunction at all in returning to this kind of extraordinary belligerence. And as you say, without any awareness of how their words will be heard in Russia. They say, well, hey, this is the stuff we were hearing in the 1930s. And now you're talking about the turning, that you're making a major turning in your military posture. You're going to suddenly spend an additional 100 billion euros on your military. And you're now going to be in Lithuania, the Baltics. You're going to be arming them and turning them into, these people are rabidly anti-Russian anyway. So you're now going to be training them for what end? So it's quite it's something that has passed under the radar because we're so used to the idea that we don't have to worry about Germany. They're basically they've become pussycats. They're just pacifists. We don't have to worry about them. And then, well, why should we assume that they're just pussycats? And if we go back to Yugoslavia, they engineered that breakup of Yugoslavia. They did it. First thing they did as soon as they got unification, they destroyed Yugoslavia. And so, we're just lazily assuming, oh yeah, they're so sweet, they're like Willy Brandt, who falls down on his knees before the before the wartime memorial. That's what they're like now. I don't think we should just make these kinds of assumptions.
Yeah, well, and if you're going to be, German troops are going to be deployed in foreign countries the first time since the Second World War. I mean, on a permanent basis, okay, not part of some kind of humanitarian intervention. Russia is going to respond to it. The Baltic states are on Russia's front porch. I mean, St. Petersburg is very, very close. So again, it's just kind of like the Stoltenberg disease.
Yes.
You know, is that, you know, we're projecting a security. No, you're projecting threats. Okay, and the difference is here. I mean, we all can stomach Stoltenberg because, you know, he's a low octane thinker. Okay, he's a low octane bureaucrat that has he's on a loop. You know, we're a defensive alliance. We're a defensive alliance.
Yes.
He's not the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany. Okay. Because, I mean, even though it's Sergeant Scholz, he's still Chancellor, and you better take him seriously because he's got the job. Yeah. If I were the French and the Russians, to be honest with you, I would be very concerned here. I mean, well, the problem is we still haven't had enough time. I know for everyone that means sound crazy. 80 years isn't enough time. And what Scholz is saying, and I don't think he's aware of it, and I think NATO is a symptom of it, is that Europe has still not come to, collectively, including Russia, come to a consensus on the outcome of the Second World War.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so if you look at Germany, now, you know, Germany has, you know, officially proclaimed when it signed all those agreements in September 1990, the 2+4 agreement, they accepted their eastern borders. But that doesn't mean that Germany isn't still working out some way in which it doesn't accept the eastern border. I mean, obviously it's not going to go to war with Poland, but by using the EU as its hinterland, it's kind of basically, you know, overturning that agreement that it signed in September 1990. And the whole NATO expansion is kind of about that. You have turned, I mean, it was a result of World War II, the creation of these communist states, those there, Soviet Union, it needed a buffer zone, and there it was. So what did you do? You took this buffer zone and grabbed them for yourself, which was going to obviously create anxiety among Russians. And what are you doing now? You're doing everything possible to further that anxiety. So, you know, it's not like anyone in Germany is saying, oh, we don't want to cause any more anxiety among Russians. You know, we've got a historical responsibility. You know, hey, I'm going to Moscow to make sure that, you know, that the Russians aren't anxious about NATO expansion. No, they're not doing that. They say, no, you know, Article 10 of the North Atlantic Treaty is sacrosanct. That's the German position.
What EU country can afford a 100 billion euro military expansion, George? There's only one. There's only one.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And when you say that in one sentence, and the next sentence is, you know, the EU should expand. Well, if you're on the receiving end of that expansion, you would define that as Germany is expanding.
Yeah, that's right.
And again, I go back to, then we do not have a consensus in Europe from Portugal to the Urals about what the meaning of any kind of consensus of the end of the Second World War. And right. If you're sitting in Moscow, you don't see that. Okay.
Right. No, that's right. And that's why, if you're sitting in Moscow, you think, well, basically, okay, we had World War I, then we have a kind of allied intervention in against Russia, or, you know, against the Bolsheviks, but it was an allied intervention that was stopped by opposition, because of opposition domestically. I mean, you know, the British trade unions actually just simply went on strike and they weren't going to support this. So you had that. Then a few years later, it was just a few years later, we have another onslaught, you know, this time led by Germany. And then we have the Cold War. You know, again, the Soviet Union is now faced by a United States-led NATO. Again, Germany playing an important role in there. You know, home of nuclear missiles. So now that comes to an end, and in no time at all, we suddenly have it yet again, kind of this Western expansionism towards the borders. This is something that has to prey on the minds of any Russian leadership. And then when Sergeant Scholz says we're going to bring in Georgia, why are you bringing in Georgia? I mean, then you have to, why do you suddenly bring in Georgia? I mean, Georgia is nowhere near Europe. The only reason you're bringing in Georgia is because of Russia's fraught history with Georgia. There was a nasty war not so long ago. And suddenly Scholz is talking about bringing in Georgia.
And bringing in Moldova. Yeah. Why? Oh, because it's on Russia's doorstep. Okay. Right. And plus, it would be a staging ground for some kind of fifth column. There's, folks, a lot of Moldovans work in Russia, a lot. Right. Okay. Right. Remember a few years ago there was an attempted color revolution, and it was the young people frustrated the fact that their parents were all working in Russia, because you can't make any money in Moldova because it's one of the most corrupt places on the planet. Okay, it's one of those situations where Moldova, there's like 8 families that run everything. Okay, right. That's the case in Armenia. That's the case in Georgia.
Yes. No, that's right. So here, this EU expansion is kind of a part and parcel of this, essentially Europe defining itself by the other. Well, this is what, we have to expand because we are not like Russia, because Russia's expansionist. So we want to show we're not like Russia, which is expansionist by expanding. And you think, well, where's Russia expanding to? Russia's not expanding anywhere. Europe, however, is continually thinking about expanding. And of course, then he goes on, because he's not going to stop with Georgia. Then there's going to be Armenia and Azerbaijan and so on. So this is how Europe is defining stuff, and that's of course very dangerous, because you ultimately think, well, that's probably because not that much unites Europe. You're pursuing policies that are obviously not popular in Europe. So how do you get everybody on board? Well, you say, oh, values. We are not like Russia. Russia is so alien to us.
We can't fix the problems that we created, so we're going to expand.
That's right, exactly.
No, I mean, and again, getting away from having a unanimous vote among the member states. I mean, it's interesting that Germany is taking the lead in this because of their problems with Poland and Hungary. Right. So again, I mean, it's not going to be Slovenia that's going to be, the decision maker. Right. It's just by sheer weight of the German economy. So when Moldova or Georgia and these other places, who's going to be bringing, who's going to be trading with them? It's going to be major economic power. Germany is an export-led country. That's how it got rich, off of cheap Russian energy. Okay, and so this is a way to get the thorn known as Poland out of your side, because they just get everybody to gang up on them, and they don't like the Poles anyway. Okay, right. So I mean that's
right.
It's a stealth way of doing it.
That's right. But what's also interesting is that let's say a country like Poland. Now Poland, which is kind of rabidly, insanely anti-Russian. That's quite nice. The Germans are happy with that. No one criticizes the Poles for their, absolutely crazy idea that somehow Soviet Union and Nazi Germany both started World War II. I mean, everyone's like, yeah, that's good. Happy with that. Of course, the Germans are very happy with somebody claiming that, hey, we weren't responsible. Maybe Stalin was more responsible than we were. So,
and then eventually, at least the Soviet Union attacked.
That's right. That's what
Germany. Then it was in Poland. Okay.
That's right.
We'll get there.
We will get there. But of course, when Poland does something that the EU doesn't like what does the EU care about? Like abortion or gay marriage, they come down on Poland like a ton of bricks. You go the wrong way on gay marriage, and suddenly Ursula von der Leyen, who is very happy with you ranting and raving about Russia, suddenly, hey, these are not values. These are not European values. But hating somebody else, that's European values. But hey, what?
Well, you're supposed to hate Russians, okay, and love gay marriage.
Exactly. And the same thing as when we were talking about the other day about the Baltic states with their denial of rights to Russians, wanting to create a kind of a apartheid state there, having Russians in their ghettos or maybe even throwing them out. That's okay. No one in Europe is going to complain about that. But you put a foot wrong on the issue of transgender rights. Whew, Ursula von der Leyen, kick up a fuss. That she cares about.
And those Afghan refugees that, child rape, once they get set foot into the European Union, they're never thrown out. But Russians that found themselves on the other side of the border when the Soviet Union came to an end, they have no rights.
That's right. Exactly. That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. So you get the sense that here, Europe is kind of becoming a very, it's a sort of dark, sinister force. At any time, when you're driven by hatred, your ideology is one of hatred. Yeah, your ideology one is defining yourself by what you're not. It never ends well. Kind of Europe has been down this path before, but that seems to be where the Scholz, von der Leyen, and Baerbock EU is heading.
Yeah, I mean, they're so tolerant that they can't tolerate people that are intolerant.
That's right, exactly.
It's very circular, isn't it?
Right.
No, I mean, it's a liberal authoritarianism is what it is. Other people will call it liberal fascism. George and I like to refrain from using the word fascism and fascist because it's so fraught now as a label, because it's really important to understand what it is, and the historical examples are what you should look at and not throw it as a slur. So I would say liberal authoritarianism, because this is what it's getting down to. But the other, in the Russians in this case, they have no agency, they have no rights. They don't even have the capacity to have values, so you don't have to use it. No. See, and this is what makes them so grossly intolerant.
That's right. That's right.
And cut off all their media. Okay. Nope. Don't listen to them.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Steal their property. And you happen to be rich and you're Russian, and you happen to own a house in London. Well, tough luck, buddy. you don't have a house anymore. So yeah, that's it. And it's kind of always very strange. Where did they get this idea from that they are superior to Russia? I mean, that's always kind of baffled me. It's like, this is a nation, amazingly distinguished literature, one of the greatest literatures in the world, scientific contributions. And this long predated the revolution. I mean, the Russian scientists were among the greatest in the world, Mendeleev and so on. Where did they get the idea from that they were somehow inherently superior to Russia? I mean, it's always just baffled me.
Well, we could probably talk about that until we could drop dead. I mean, it's such a vast subject. But I mean, there is the difference of Catholicism and Orthodoxy.
Okay.
I mean, that's one important element. Okay. Right. Another is that it's because of Western Christianity, it's very messianic. Orthodoxy is not messianic at all. Okay, it's actually quite benign in that sense. And when you have this secularization, so you have the secularization of society, but they keep the messianic element to it. And so their liberalism is messianic, okay? Which means it's dogmatic and they only have the answer. And anyone else that does anything differently was a heretic, okay? And must be brought to account. I mean, one of the things that, living here for so long, as a society, yes, it is an alternative to the West. Yes. And it works.
Yes.
That's where this intolerant West, they cannot sleep at night knowing that there's an alternative model. Yes. And it's succeeding while theirs is failing.
Yes.
It's very much part of this here, okay?
Yes. Yes.
There's so many different angles you can...
right, no, I think it's right. And I think that it clearly is failing. I mean, it's, that liberal model, I mean, it's obviously failing economically, but it's failing politically as well. I mean, it's so that countries are having difficulties actually creating some sort of a bond between these different parts of society. I mean, if you look at, let's say you look at the United States, I mean, obviously it's out of Europe, but it's really having a problem essentially even accepting election results. This is now becoming a permanent feature of United States politics, which is that you don't accept any election results. That's a serious problem. You've got, because that's the one thing you always said, okay, well, everyone's agreed on, you have an election and then that's it. Then we move on to the post-election phase. But instead, and this has now been going on for many years, as long predates 2016, we move on to essentially contesting the last election. That means, you're failing as creating a political system to which everybody subscribes, and rather than a zero-sum game. If we're not winning, we're losing, and we have to destroy the opposition.
The way things are going, particularly in the United States, don't be surprised, George, if we have a Guaido for president soon, because it'll be, people say, I mean, we're at the stage now where elections are contested. Okay, but it's going to get a lot worse than contested.
Right.
All right. And it's because of just liberal intolerance all over again. It's just we have to win because we're the good guys, okay? And if we don't win, I mean, it's because of Russia or it's because of MAGA and all of that. It's really very scary because their intolerance breeds distrust and will eventually breed violence. I mean, if you look at violence, where does it come from? It comes almost always from the left, okay? Now, historically, yes, the right was very violent, okay, yes. But right now, that's a stereotype from the past they're bringing in right now. Again, and we were talking about Europe, but in the United States, where are all these violent MAGA people? I mean, can you show me one?
None, absolutely. And yet the media play up this completely fantastical story about these violent, terrifying Trump supporters. There's no evidence for that, so they just keep repeating it. You keep repeating, and then sooner or later, people come to believe it. That's the way propaganda always works.
And to bring it back to Europe, when you have Annalena Baerbock saying that she doesn't care what the voters say, that she's going to continue supporting Ukraine. This is exactly in line with what we're talking about here. So the hell with the electoral system. And it comes from a foreign minister of the most important country in Europe.
That's right. That's it. Yeah, that's right. And because interestingly enough, after she said that, and this obviously made the rounds because it was such an extraordinary thing to say, she and her acolytes then turned around and said, oh, this has all been distorted by the Russians. The Russia has distorted it, because you go back and listen to her words. That's exactly what she said.
My lion ears again.
So, oh, no, it was all the Russians. They lied about this. But, that's become, I mean, in 2 weeks' time, there's going to be an election in Italy. The right is poised to win, and therefore the right will be forming a government. And of course, everyone's now terrified about what their stance will be on sanctions. We know one thing we do know, which is when they win, I think they will win, there'll be the scream, a kind of a primal scream, Putin interfered in the election. It was Putin who engineered this election result.
Again, going back to what Scholz had to say, I found it very curious, George. There's no hint of, well, if the EU is going to expand, is that a popular proposition among the polity that makes up the European Union? Has anybody asked?
Right.
Has anybody asked?
Right.
No, because it's in the elite agenda. Of course they want it to.
Right.
Okay. I mean, so you want to have, so you have, here we go. We have laborers that leave Moldova to work in Russia. So you want those same laborers to come to the European Union? Is that the proposition?
Yeah, and that's it. And that's precisely an example of how political leaders really just don't give a damn about what their voters think. Because you're talking about the Moldovans, but the same applies to the Montenegrins and the Macedonians. Once they're in the EU, boom, they're all going to head off to Germany. Holland, you know, all the places where they think they can make some serious money. I mean, well, they're not going to sit in, you know, in this, poverty-ridden countries. They go, you know, that's what everyone does. And yet Scholz and Baerbock, they don't care. I know, that's fine, you know, bring them in. So again, you know, these are politicians who care nothing at all about their about their politics, even though the migrant flow helped essentially engineer Brexit. I mean, if it hadn't been for the migrant flow, probably Britain would have stayed in Europe. But it was essentially this cheap labor coming from Eastern Europe that turned the British against the EU. But again, you know, these people, these Ursula von der Leyen, you know, they absolutely couldn't care less what people think.
You know, studying modern European history, and you've already echoed it. It's, you know, when Germans talk about the future of Europe, you know, everybody kind of takes a step back and kind of like, okay, all right, okay, yeah, you got an opinion, okay. But there's that unease. Yeah. There's always that unease, and for the most part, the Germans have been kind of gingerly moving along, not to be too pushy and all of that. But and something that you and I did a few months ago, I said we both agreed is the mask finally coming off.
Right.
And I kind of think it is. Okay.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's getting down to a proposition, considering all of the historical revisionism that we've witnessed over the last 20 years. We're getting into the Overton window is expanding, saying, well, it really wasn't that bad. Okay, there were bad things, okay? And we owned up to it, okay?
That's right.
But, and then you get the but.
That's right.
And the whole argument comes apart, or the whole narrative changes.
That's right. And that's what you mean. I mean, remember back in the 1980s, there was the historical strike, you know, with these German historians who challenged the prevailing thesis. But in fact, they didn't go that far. All they were arguing was that the Germans who were fighting on the Eastern Front were actually patriotic Germans who were trying to protect Germany from the onslaught of the Red Army. So that somehow that itself was something, you know, presenting them as patriotic. I'm not endorsing that, but that was their kind of their main argument. So that they were protecting Germans. So, you know, we shouldn't condemn them. But essentially, I mean, you're going to move now, given the intensity of the hatred that these German leaders have toward Russia, and their extraordinary love for Ukraine, even though they know perfectly well all of the Nazi manifestations in Ukraine. They know all of that. And even so, they are siding with those people. They think, well, okay, how far away we move from, you know, the Germany of the 1930s? We are fighting on behalf of Western civilization. You know, that's it. These are the barbarians. And we have to make use of what tools we have. You know, if there happen to be some unsavory characters, such as the, all of those Nazis, these Azov battalion types, well, so be it.
Well, it is kind of interesting. Remember the book, The Rites of Spring, it's a very interesting book. I'm not sure I always agree with it. It's really well written, but the Germans fought for civilization, First World War. Right. Germans fought for civilization, the French fought for culture, remember? That's right. I don't know if that's true, but it's interesting. It's an interesting proposition, okay? Right. And then we have, if you use the historical debate in the 1980s in Germany, the Germans were protecting civilization, kind of rings a bell, doesn't it? And then under the cloak of the European Union, with the stars and the blue, we're fighting for civilization. Yeah. I've seen this before.
I've seen it before. And again, you know, we saw it in the 90s. Remember in the 90s when Germany, you know, not only did they rush to recognize Croatia and Slovenia against all international law, but then they were arming and supporting Croatia. And they knew perfectly well that these people they were supporting, this was in the 1990s. So it wasn't that long since the end of World War II.
Some of them were still alive.
That was still alive, exactly. It was only 45 years since the end of World War II. So there was all these people were all alive, you know, essentially who had committed horrific crimes and who had made a home for themselves in Germany through the rat lines. They'd escaped from Yugoslavia after the war. You know, they came back, and Germany continued to support them, and they came up with this hatred for the Serbs that was reminiscent of the pre-World War I hatred of the Serbs. You know, Serbian Musterbian. You know, they absolutely, the Serbs must die. So, you know, it's kind of interesting how the Germans, you know, when the moment strikes, you know, hey, they just revert back to all of the kind of antipathies and hatreds from not so distant past.
Yeah, and it's a part of the pathology of liberalism that it tries to, it demands that whatever it does is in the name of progress. Okay, that's it's a very interesting discourse that they play, because it fundamentally feels right, doesn't it?
Yes.
But it fundamentally, historically, is a dead end, or at the very least, a cul-de-sac. Okay.
Yes.
And you know, again, going back to Scholz's speech, I mean, you're talking about Germany, you're talking about the EU, interchangeable, but we know who's going to run it. Okay. Yeah. And that is something that I think that that shows the poverty and how bankrupt the European Union is as a political project. I mean, if you know, the argument in the 1980s with the Germans, you know, do all roads lead to the Holocaust? Do all roads lead to Auschwitz? Okay. And now what we're doing is that all roads lead to centralization. Okay. And there's no value in that at all. It's about power.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, that's right. And that's why. How is Germany justifying this? Well, it's justifying this by the threat posed by Russia. And that's what Scholz did in his speech. It's what Ursula von der Leyen says all the time. It's what Annalena Baerbock says. Well, it's because of this horrific threat that Russia poses. At any minute now, Russia can just unleash its Asiatic hordes against this Europe. And therefore, we must expand to keep the Russians out. And you know, again, yeah, we kind of heard this before, but this is the rationale that for you know, Scholz's you know, grand EU project.
Yeah, I think I read this in the original French from Napoleon. Okay, and then it picked up in Central Europe. Right. Historically, it hasn't worked out well, and using Scholz's argument and Baerbock and von der Leyen and we have now Liz, you know, we must have a Russian threat because that's the only way we're going to move forward. We must have a threat. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
It's called threat inflation. You know, that's how this works. You know, I was reading today this ridiculous thing the new government in the UK is going to do with these energy caps and how people are going to pay. They never work. They never work. They create shortages and the price will be higher. I mean, it is shooting yourself in the head, okay, with a gunshot, okay? And, you know, but no, it's all Russia's fault. No, it's policies that you decided upon.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And actually, everybody likes to focus on these pivotal points here. If you look at Europe's energy policy for particularly the last 20 years, last 10 years, this was all going to happen irrespective of what happened with Ukraine. Yes. You know, you created the spot market and all this, you know, then you have supply chain problems. And then you know what, George? It crashes down on you, okay? And this is completely foreseen.
Yes. Yes, no, I think that's right. I mean, we talked about this. You know, they didn't invest in fossil fuels. There had been all the warnings that that you're underinvesting in fossil fuels. They gambled everything on renewables, and then they compounded all the problems with the spot market. And and rather than do the sensible thing, the long-term contract. Oh, Russia's going to make money on the long-term contract. No. We're not going to allow Russia to make money. Well, Russia turns out to make a lot more money by your gamble on the spot market. So yeah, that's it. But just going back to Germany. I mean, look, if you think about 1990, so Germany, essentially signs this, essentially it's kind of peace agreement on September the 12th, 1990, with the four powers. That's only 33 years ago. Well, actually, no, 32 years ago. That's not a long time. So we've all been, bought into the whole thing of this benign Germany. Is, that the country you least need to worry about. They're all pacifists. They're all, oh no, we don't want war, we hate war. And why should we buy into it? 32 years is nothing. And when you suddenly start listening to, Scholz's grandiose schemes, Ursula von der Leyen ranting and raving. And then Annalena Baerbock talking about her grandfather bringing peace. And you think, well, was this such a great idea? Blandly signing off on German reunification without really any guarantees on anything.
But what the interesting thing is that, sure, year after year after year, the majority of Germans want American bases out of their country. Yeah. But that doesn't get in Scholz's way. Because, well, George, if Georgia, Moldova, and other countries are brought in, Kosovo, well, I suppose those are going to be the German battalions of the future, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense, okay? Because, you join the European military force, it's well paid, you're educated in Germany and in Holland and all that, and and what you do is you hollow out these societies. Another example of elite capture, okay? It's like Roman legions, in Gaul. Yeah, I'll work for the Romans. Yeah, that's a good job. Okay, you got cool uniforms.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's right. And when you think of these countries like the Baltic states, they're kind of poor countries. And then suddenly, they're going to enjoy the patronage of Germany. Yeah, that's good. That'll be nice. And now that's explicit. That's explicit part of NATO doctrine.
And it's a good cause. It's a good cause.
Exactly. It's a good cause. Hey, don't you hate Russia? Yeah, I hate Russia. How much do you hate Russia? A lot. Okay, good. You're hired. So that's the new NATO. And all the media, that's particularly the Anglo-Saxon media, is so excited. Oh, great! Germany has finally rid itself of all of its, guilt complex from World War II. Thank God! Now we've got this activist Germany, part of the Western Alliance. Great.
I'm sure Macron, maybe that's, he called Putin again. I think maybe they talked actually about
another one.
Macron's calling Putin. Yeah, I'm getting a little worried about the Germans. He said, we're always worried about the Germans.
That's right.
No, but you can't discount that. I mean, again, I'll mention Henry Kissinger's book, Diplomacy. Again, George and I do not condone or advocate for Henry Kissinger, but it is a good book, except for the introduction. Tear it out, throw it away. But the rest of the book is quite good. And that, France's position in the European diplomatic framework here, and the French have to be worried about, because with the exit of Merkel, Macron was thinking, I get the Iron Throne now, I get the crown. Didn't work out, did it for you, dude? No.
I think so. I mean, I think Macron, if he had any, sense or any strength of character, strength of purpose, would see that now's the time for Franco-Russian reconciliation and a return to the Franco-Russian alliances and friendships of the past.
Back to the balance that Europe.
That's right.
Europe was at peace; it had balance.
Right, but his hands are tied. The hands were tied ever since France decided to return to NATO. I mean, it was under Jacques Chirac they made that decision to return to NATO, while France was outside of NATO for, ever since de Gaulle, then France had the leeway to forge alliances with Russia. But now France is part of NATO. Very, very hard to disentangle yourself from that now.
And as you've pointed out, George, it's very important to remember is that when the Soviet Union confronted Nazi Germany, the UK was still outside of the continental system that Hitler created, and the US wasn't in the war at the time. Now, as they talk about expansion of Germany, okay, you have all of NATO worlds against Russia. It's worse than it was in 1941.
Yeah. Definitely is, because
I'm plagiarizing George, because George said that months ago.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important, because at that time, basically Hitler had wanted at the very least, he wanted a free hand in the East, the UK staying out. And that was his dream scenario. He didn't get it. UK did not stay out. And so he had a war in his hands with the UK. And the United States wasn't involved yet. Now, basically, you've got an entire continent united with the United States against Russia. This is Russia. This is not even the Soviet Union. So, you know, that's why, you know, Russia's situation is much more perilous than it was in 1941.
And the Russians know it.
Yeah, exactly.
They know it. All right, we're going to continue this. I mean, this is something in real time that's unfolding. The speech that Scholz gave didn't get enough coverage. I'm glad George brought it to our attention.
Exactly. It was very passed under the radar, you know, but it was an important speech, yeah. All right.
We're going to keep an eye on it, as we always do.
Good. So anyway, this is
tomorrow is
exactly
the wait is over.
That's right. This is the gaggle. Tomorrow is my live stream. So that's Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Please join me. Come with comments, criticisms, suggestions, and on the way out the door, think about little Buddy. You know, think about, you know, he now is too depressed even to make an appearance. You know, I can't take it anymore.
Skippy is standing in for him.
Yeah, see, exactly, standing in for him. He can't make it. So think about him. See if, you know, you got a few bob dingling around in your pockets. If you have, whip him out, dunk him in his little tip jar. It'll relieve some of his despondency. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can invest in superior technology, and above all, the more likely it is that Buddy will rescind that terrifying Chihuahua fatwa. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.